Good morning. My name is Precious Nkosi. I'll be lecturing Finance 300 for your standard costing. We apologize for the online lectures. As you know, due to the corona pandemic, we are unable to have contact sessions. So you will not be having class for this, but it is a very important topic, and I would advise you to follow on Blackboard the steps in terms of how to get to a level where you're actually prepared for your assessments. The first level will obviously be to download your lecture slides, to download your learning guide, and to download the working example which I've uploaded for you. In this session, I'll take you through the introduction, and then I'll have several videos for all the sections of this topic. But for today, I'm just going to take you through the introduction. What I would like to say is that you just need to make sure that you keep to par with what we are doing, because when we get back to business as usual, it'll be quite difficult for you to catch up if you've spent this time not following and not being on par with what we are doing in class. So standard costing is actually a very important topic because you will carry it forward to your CTA level. So this means that you need to make sure that the notes you use to study for this are sufficient and will be able to prepare you for CTA as well. There will be nothing new added when you get to your CTA level in terms of standard costing. So the theory that we cover now will be sufficient for you to be able to just add on a few technical concepts at CTA level. But basically, we are covering all the bases. So my advice to you is that if you make your notes, make sure that you'll be able to use them again next year. Make sure that they're as detailed as possible, and that you'll be able to follow, and that you do use this time to prepare efficiently for your assessments. This means that also when you do questions, you'll see in your learning guide that I've added where you add for yourself what you've learned from each question that you attempt. So it's very important that you record what you're doing, you record what you're learning, you record the mistakes that you made in your questions, in your assessments, and how you overcame that, the new things you keep learning as you go on, and some of the challenging things which I will explain in each of the several videos that we're going to have. Please note that it will be announced and you'll be aware when we're going back to contact sessions, but for now, please bear with us. So just in terms of standard costing, I want you to think of it in your normal daily life, first of all. So when do you use the word standards in your life? So I know for girls, this is, for example, when you say you've got standards in terms of the guys you date, this says something about the level which you accept into your life, right? So you need to be careful of the words I'm using here. So it's the level you expect. So there is a certain expectation there, and there's also what you normally accept. So what is normally accepted, that is what we can refer to as a standard. I mean, if you look at the road, there's the law in which you need to abide by when you are driving, and that is the standard you are expected to drive at. For example, you're not expected to exceed 120 kilometers per hour. That is the standard which you will be measured against should a traffic officer stop you. Now we look at a car. If Ford makes a car, for example, they have standards in terms of the operation of the car, how it must look, the interior, the engine, the performance, the speed, everything. They have a standard which they have set for themselves to say, for a Ford Fiesta, we expect it to take off at this speed. The interior, how big the car is, how small it is. So all of those things, there's standard involved in them. And these are things that you encounter in your daily life. It could be your cooking. There's a way that is expected from you. They know that when you have cooked, this is what you expect. That's the normal for you. That's the norm. So if you just look at what I've just put there in your brackets, what are standard is, it is a code. You also use your IFRS to study accounting, so that is also a code. It's a standard. It says to you, this is how you need to account for certain things. So that's the norm. That is what is expected of you. It can also be the ideal. For example, when I spoke to you about when I mentioned that when we talk of standard, you can be referring to what is acceptable in your life. That could also be an ideal to say, I expect myself to look like this at when I leave the house. That is the ideal for me. I will not leave the house unless I look a certain way. It is a law, like we've already discussed. It's also a measure. So when you have a standard, what you need to always keep in mind is that when you have a standard, you're comparing it to something. That's why we're saying it is a measure. It is not a standard just on its own, but once you compare it to something, it shows that I've deviated from my normal way of doing things. I've deviated from my standard. I've deviated from what is expected of me. I haven't followed the rules, so I've deviated from the standard rules that have been set. So standards are really something that we encounter in our daily lives. And when you approach this topic, I want you to keep going back to what a standard is in your normal life, because that ties exactly to what it is in terms of the technicalities of this topic. So don't deviate from just in my normal life. What do I refer to when I say standard? Is it the norm, the ideal, the measure, the model, the norm? All those words can be used to describe what a standard is, but do not make it too technical for yourself. Always refer back to, I use standards every day. Standards are everywhere you turn. With that said, to take it back to the technical part of it, we say that standard costing provides us with useful information that will guide us to improve decision making. Now remember, in the previous slide, I already mentioned that it is a measure. So if it is a measure, it is something that can assist you in making a decision. If it is a norm, you can use that norm to say, this is how we normally do things, and therefore that can assist you in making a decision. It is also a control mechanism. That means it provides us with attention directing information. Now, what is important for me with that is that when we say attention direction information, it means that just you calculating the standards is not enough. It's attention directing information, meaning you need to use the standards and the variances, everything that you've calculated, to direct you in a certain direction for you to be able to make a decision. That decision could be used as a control measure. So the words that I've bolded, they are very important, and I want you to always keep them at the back of your mind. Is that when I'm doing standard costing, firstly, I'm doing it so that I can make a decision. So after you've done a calculation, step back, ask yourself, is this helping someone to make a decision? Have I given enough information for someone to make a decision? It's a control mechanism. Have I aided the person or the manager who's involved to be able to have a control measure of some sort, right? And it also provides us with attention directing information. This means that it can give you the red flag or the green flag to say, you're doing well, keep going that direction, or you're not doing so well, you need to fix certain things. So it is an attention direction. It gives direction to the information that we need to focus on. Okay, English. So variances can also be used to analyze and interpret information or performance, which is the income statement. So as you see, you'll see that the focus is actually on the income statement, because the variances, we can use them to analyze and to interpret the performance of the company that we're working with. Okay, before I lose you. Now, you studying this course, you're going to do well, you're going to pass, you're going to qualify as a CA maybe, you're going to work in finance, auditing, tax, wherever you go. Now, if you by any chance land up a management accountant role, what is expected of you? Now, this mind map just sort of gives an overall view of what a management accountant role is. So they can do accounts and taxation, supply chain management, business planning and development, resource management. Now, the purpose for this slide is that so that you can link the role of a management accountant to what standard costing is. So we said that standard costing is a tool that we use to make decisions. Now, if you can check here, you will see that the role of a management accountant includes making decisions. For example, there in the green, you have production, planning, and cost management. So that means you need to be able to make a decision in terms of your production and how it's going to go, and your cost management. Remember, we did say that standard costing is a management tool. So therefore, if you look at the slide, then you can link it back to why exactly do you need to sit and study standard costing. It is because you'll use it in your role as a management accountant. You can use it for resource management, because you'll get attention directing information from your standard costing exercise that will assist you in managing your resources better, therefore improving the performance of the company. It will assist you in production planning and cost management, and it will also assist you in business planning and development, which is a key area, a key focus in terms of making decisions. And as we said, standard costing aids us in making decisions. Therefore, that's why we are studying it, because we are on a route that could lead us to being management accountants. Therefore, we need to know how standard costing works so that we're able to interpret the information that we get from a standard costing system and that we are able to make decisions. So we are not doing it just G. Anyway, so back to the technicalities. If I just look at the textbook definition of standard costing, they say it is a management accounting control system. It is used widely by management accountants to aid decision making. Now, by now, you can see the keywords. They just keep popping to you. It's decision making, the management accounting control system. It is a control system. That means it can aid us in terms of checking the activities that we're doing. What do we need to be careful of? Where do we need to look to make sure that we are still on the right path? Right? So if we just look at what actually a standard cost is in terms of the number, if I give you a number and I say my standard cost is 100, what am I saying to you? First of all, you need to understand that the number is a predetermined cost. So this means there was an exercise done, and then I came to the number 100 and I said this 100 represents what I need to perform at. So this 100 is an acceptable level of performance for me, right? So it is predetermined. It is historical, if you want to put it that way. So can also say that it's target cost that should be incurred under efficient operating conditions. Like I said, it's a historical cost or a predetermined cost. However, it is under efficient operating conditions. Now, as we go further in explaining who uses standard costing, why it is used, and how it is used, you understand more in terms of what I mean that it is incurred under efficient operating conditions. But this basically means that this is my norm. As I've said in my example, that 100 that is a predetermined cost is my norm that I incur under normal, efficient operating conditions. Now, it's easy to get confused with standard cost and budgeted cost. And the distinction is simple. A budget provides the cost expectation for a total activity. A standard is on a per unit basis. So it's a very easy distinction. Just remember, if I give you a standard, I'm giving you that standard on a per unit basis, or it starts and then it is derived, but it starts on a per unit basis. However, for a budget, I need to give you a total, a cost for a total activity. Now, who uses standard costing? First of all, it needs to be a well-established company. The reason it needs to be a well-established company is because, like I said, it is a predetermined cost. So for you to predetermine, it means you must have a history of doing the same thing over and over again for you to find what is your efficient operating condition and what is the standard at that efficient operating condition. So it needs to be a well-established company. You can't start a company today and in the next month say, I've found my standards. You haven't been through all the motions that a company goes through from start, and then as it grows, as it goes through the different stages of growth. You need to have gone through that for you to say, I've found my niche. This is where I perform at my best level, right? Usually manufacturing companies, and the reason for this is that standard costing works when you are doing a lot of the same thing. If I am manufacturing cell phones, for example, I'm going to make 1 million S10s, right? Samsung S10s. and then I'm going to sell them. But those S10s are the same. They're the same. It's just an S10. Everybody gets the same S10. So the manufacturing process for all of them is actually the same. Therefore, I am able to determine a standard for all these cell phones that I'm manufacturing, right? If I am still in the manufacturing industry, but let's say I am making tailor-made suits for graduations, which we'll be going through soon yourself. So now if I'm at that stage, it means that someone needs to come to me and tell me, this is how I want my suit, this is the color that I would like, this is the specific tailor-made things that I want on it. I can't think of any design examples right now, but this is how I want the color to look, everything like that. Now this tailor-made suit is going to be different for each and every customer. I am not manufacturing 100 of them and then selling them to Jet so that they can sell them to their customers. I am manufacturing one just for Mr. Lindsay Maseko because he wants a tailor-made suit. So in that case, I can't use standard costing because my manufacturing process will sort of differ for every client that I have. However, if I'm making all these suits and then selling them to Jet, making them under the same manufacturing process, that's just different colors and maybe sizes, of course, that manufacturing process is the same. Therefore, I can establish for myself to say, under efficient operating conditions, this is how long it will take me to make a suit, for example. These are the things that I need to make a suit. However, if I am on the other side where it's a niche market and I'm saying I am making these only for orders and for certain people that want them, they can say now add more buttons than your normal suit, and you can't say now that's deviating from the standard because this is based on a tailor-made system. However, on the other side, with a manufacturing company that makes the same thing over and over again, it is easier to use standard costing. Service industries. Now this is something that you need to go and think about. Can a service industry use standard costing? Now use the examples that I've given you above to say, is it a repetitive process? Am I doing the same thing over and over again in terms of the process or in terms of the service that I'm delivering? If that is the case, then it means yes, I will definitely have a standard way of performance, a standard service that I offer, and I can therefore compare that and use that as a measure. However, if my service is different from client to client, it was more difficult for me to use standard costing because for every service that I offer, it will be different and I cannot use that as a norm. Go back to the word norm. If it's normal to do things the way you've been doing them for the whole entire process, you can definitely use standard costing. Now, standard costing is a control technique that reports variances by comparing actual cost to preset standard. Now, this now is the system itself. What is a standard costing system itself? How does it work? Basically, this is saying we look at actual costs and we compare them to preset standard. I've highlighted preset standard there for you because we'll go back and explain exactly what that means. But basically, you've got an actual cost, you've got a standard cost, you're comparing the two and you managing this by exception. You're saying, this is what I expect, which is my standard. This is what the actual cost is. I am comparing the two. If I get a major difference or if I get any difference, I will manage by exception because I will go then and say, this area I need to look into because there were variances. If there are no variances, it means I'm doing well. Or if the variance is positive, I will then interpret what that means for me as a company. Now, what does the system involve? It involves, first of all, you need to set the standards, and we'll discuss how you do that in the next slide or so. Then you need to compare the standard to the actual, and then you need to analyze the difference. What is very important for you at this level of your study is that you know how to do bullet number 2, which is comparing the standard operating cost to the actual operating cost, basically meaning standard cost subtract actual cost. There you have it. And then you need to be able to take that simple calculation and analyze it so that you can make decisions. You need to say, why is this favorable or unfavorable? Why did I get a deviation? Why is there a variance in the first place? You need to be able to analyze that for decision-making purposes. Remember, I said standard costing in the very beginning is used as a decision-making mechanism by management. So whatever it is that you do, you need to be able to assist and aid people in making decisions. Now, in terms of just establishing standard costs, how you establish it, you need to set quantities and prices for materials, labor, services to be consumed in producing or performing each operation associated with the product. So this means if I'm making a cell phone, everything that it took to have this final product will be included in the standard cost. The plastic, the material, all the material that I use, the labor, the people that put things together, the software, the machinery that was involved, everything will be used to see what the standard cost is for me to be able to get to my final product. So that means it's materials, labor, and services. So in your questions, when you're doing a standard costing question, make sure that you're able to establish or to identify all the costs that were involved, or all the different things that were involved to get the product to its final stage, because each of those will then have a different standard and that can then be measured. So again, product standard costs are a total of all the standard costs involved for a product. So that's just the total, but all the standard costs involved for a product means it's on a per unit basis. Now, how can we set standard costs? For example, we can use historical records, meaning you say, based on my past performance, it takes me 1 hour to make the product that I'm making, right? So if someone comes and under normal, efficient operating conditions, they take 2 hours, they've deviated from the standard and there is a problem, I need to go and check what the actual problem is. So historical records direct the direction in which my standard cost will go. So this means that it is a bit dangerous, because then past inefficiencies are involved. It means if I made an error, or if I was not as efficient in doing what I was doing in the past, that will be taken as a standard or as a norm or as the expectation for me to perform the particular task that I was performing. So that is the biggest disadvantage of it. But basically you just say what happened in the past, that is the way I expect things to go in the future. The other method that you can use is engineering study. Now, this is the preferred method, the engineering studies, because then you get an expert from outside your company to come into your company to study your operations under controlled conditions and say, these in your efficient operating level, this is how long it should take for you to manufacture a Samsung S10. This is how much plastic it should take. This is how much of software that you need. I don't know how exactly that works, but this is how much labor that you're going to need. This is how much machinery hours you're going to need for you to get to a final product, which is going to be, in this case, your cell phone. So the engineering method is a bit more efficient, or more correct, if I can put it that way. So the types of standard costs, really, this is not something that you need to sit and memorize to say what are standard costs, but it's a basic understanding to say, okay, if I'm saying there's a basic cost standard, it means that it represents the constant standards that are left unchanged over long periods. It means I've been using the standard over a long period. Now remember that companies are able to decide how they're going to use their standards, and me, in your assessment, I will tell you this is the standard that you're going to be using. If I'm saying ideal standard, it means it's the perfect performance. This could also be used as a goal to be achieved, but however, it demotivates employees if you're going to set it at a very high, if your standard is going to be a high standard. Anyway, so, or it could be currently attainable standard, which is the norm, which is what we actually use. And in your tests and your assessment, you will see that the standard that is used is the currently attainable standard, because that is the more technically correct standard to use, if I can put it that way, although companies still have a choice in terms of which one they want to use. So this cost represents those costs that should be incurred under efficient operating conditions. That's the first thing. The most important thing is that they're difficult but not impossible to achieve. So this means it does not demotivate staff. It is doable under normal operating conditions. It is easy for you to expect of them to do that because it takes into account normal spoilage, machine breakdowns, and lost time. So this is what you sort of expect to use. Please don't spend a lot of time trying to memorize, or I don't know how you study, but trying to write extensive notes on this. This is just something that you need to be able to understand, that companies have an option in terms of how they set their standard. They have an option in terms of their system, whether they use predetermined costs or they use engineering methods. You need to be aware of that. Now, the purpose of standard costing, we've already mentioned this: decision making, right? It can also be a target, like when we were going through how standards are set, the word target came through, and then motivation for employees. You can also use it as a motivation for your employees. It provides reliable data for you to be able to set your budget, and it is a control device. This is something that you can go home and study. Now, this is where this session will end, right? That was just the introduction. We'll go into the technicalities and in a working example in the next video. So what I need you to get from this is what standard costing is, the keywords, the buzzwords. Remember, I use it for decision making. So whatever I do, I need to make sure that I produce meaningful information from my standard costing exercise, because it will be used for decision making. It is used as a control mechanism by the management accountants. So you need to know that, okay, this is going to be used, for example, to control costs. It is used as an attention directing information. So you take the information and you see where are the problem areas. It is called, companies that use standard costing call it managing by exception. It means that you go through all your processes as normal. You don't go and look for problems where there are no problems. You do the standard costing exercise. You see that there's huge variances in certain sections, and then you go where there's variances and you say, this, what is happening here? What is wrong here? That's managing by exception, right? So you need to remember all those things. You need to remember the purpose of it, and that you use it in your normal daily life. It is not a big thing that you should be puzzled about. What does a standard mean to you in simple English? That is what a standard costing system will probably involve. So that is just the introduction. I hope you understand, and you can go back to your textbook and you can email me if you've got any questions, because after this introduction video I will then go into the technical parts through an example. And when we go through the technical parts, I ask you to please make sure that you're seated, you've got a pen and paper out, and as I do the exercises, you do the exercises with me and you follow. Thank you.